Fun in Colonial Times by Consuela Gomez. Colonial kids read and played games by firelight. What do you do for fun after school? Today, you might get a book from the library or a bookstore. You can play a pickup game of basketball or a board game with a friend. But 300 years ago in colonial times, kids led very different lives. Colonists had to work to survive. Children had regular chores. They had little time for games. But colonial kids still found ways to have fun. Who were these colonial people? What were their lives like? How did colonial kids have fun? Who were they? In 1607, a ship landed in North America. It carried people from England. These colonists had set out to start a new life in a new land. They built a village called Jamestown. Years later, another group of colonists sailed to North America. These colonists came for religious freedom. They named their village Plymouth. Still later, people called Quakers settled in Pennsylvania. They also came for religious freedom. The Mayflower sailed from Plymouth, England, to the coast of Massachusetts in 1620. Jamestown was the first settlement in North America. The colonists endured a long, dangerous journey. They gave up all that was familiar at home. The life they faced in a new land would not be easy. They did not know what kinds of homes to build or crops to plant. Many of these colonists were lucky to have the help of people who were already living in North America. American Indians taught them important lessons in how to farm and hunt. But life was still hard. What was daily life like? Colonial people followed a routine of chores and work. Farmers plowed, planted, and sowed. They took care of their farm animals. They sold their crops at the market. Children started very young to help with chores. By the age of 9 or 10, boys worked in the fields with their fathers. They also gathered firewood. Children even younger fed chickens and geese. They collected eggs. Girls helped their mothers prepare meals and make clothing. Families worked together on farms. In cities and towns, merchants sold their goods. Shoemakers, furniture makers, silversmiths, and blacksmiths worked. If a young boy qualified, he might be apprenticed to one of these men. That meant he worked as a helper for years. He stayed until he mastered a skill. In some colonies, only boys went to school, and girls were taught at home. In other colonies, both went to school. Paper was scarce, so children recited their lessons to learn them. They made their own pens and ink. Young boys were often sent to cities or towns to learn a trade. This whistle is made out of wood. How did they have fun? Colonial children worked hard, but they still had time for fun. They played hide and seek, tag, and hopscotch. They sang, danced, told stories, and competed in contests. There were no toy stores, so colonial kids used what was at hand to make toys. They found what elements they needed in nature or in the house. They made whistles out of tree branches. They carved balls from wood. They made dolls out of corn husks and rags. On winter nights, families gathered around the fireplace. Fathers fixed tools. Mothers sewed. Children told tongue twisters or played games. Sometimes they told riddles. They recited poems in unison. On winter days, they were outside sledding and skating. When the weather turned warm, children played outside with hoops and other toys. Summer was a time to play tag, blind man's bluff, and ring around the rosy, or to fly kites. Hoops was a favorite game of colonial children. Snowshoes. American Indians made snowshoes out of soft wood, such as willow. They tied them on with rawhide. With these shoes, they could speed across the snow. Blind man's bluff. Colonists came from different countries. They often played games that were nearly identical but had different names and sometimes even different rules. The game Blind Man's Bluff is one example. Swedish colonists played Blind Book, which means blind buck. The Germans played Blinderka, or blind cow. The colonists brought some games along with them from England, such as cards and dominoes. Many games that are familiar to us today had different names during colonial times. Hopscotch was called Scotch hoppers. Tossing a small ball in the air and catching it in a cup was called bilboquet. The games colonial children played taught them how to obey rules. They learned to take turns, to throw and catch, and to follow directions. The games also gave children a chance to use their imaginations. Let's look at some colonial games. 5 Stone. This game was played with pebbles, small flat rocks of uniform size. The children sat in a circle. The first player tossed a pebble in the air and tried to catch it on the back of the same hand. If she did it, she got another turn. If not, the next person in the circle had a turn. After everyone got a turn, the first player got a chance to go again. This time she tossed 2 pebbles and tried to catch both of them, then 3 and 4, then 5. Kids today play a similar game called jacks. Colonial streets. During colonial times, the streets were not paved. They were made out of dirt or stones, so a pebble was easy to find. American Indian games. American Indians liked to play games too. They played games of chance. They were not intimidated by games that required athletic skills, like throwing darts or spears. They enjoyed all sorts of ball games. Jack straws. The first player dropped a handful of straw on the ground. The next player had to pick up as many straws as possible without moving any of the others. He kept each straw he picked up. If he moved a straw, the next player got a turn. The game went on until all the straws were picked up. The player with the most straws was the winner. Today, we play pick-up sticks, which is almost the same. American Indians invented the game we call lacrosse today. Dolls. The colonists grew a lot of corn, so there were plenty of corn husks, the outer covering of an ear of corn. Children turned them into toys. Children folded 4 corn husks and then tied them to make a head. They made arms out of another husk. Then they drew on a face and made hair out of corn silk. They dressed their dolls in clothes made of scraps of cloth. No 2 corn husk dolls were identical. Children had to find creative ways to make toys. Children made dolls out of other things, too. They covered wooden spoons with fabric and drew on a face. Or they stuffed an old sock and sewed on eyes. Parents sometimes carved dolls out of wood. They painted on eyes with charcoal. They could use red clay for lips and red cheeks. Porcelain dolls. Some girls had dolls brought or sent from England, or dolls that their parents brought with them. These dolls were made of porcelain and had glass eyes and real hair. But they were too valuable to be played with. They were kept in a special place where they could be admired. More ways to have fun. Colonial children found ways to have fun even while they were doing chores. Sometimes they turned their work into games to make the time pass more quickly. They raced each other while gathering wood. They challenged each other to see who could milk the most cows or harvest the most corn. Most families had many children, so there was always a playmate close by. Parents were so busy that children were often left on their own to play. Neighbors got together to celebrate holidays or help each other. Everyone might build a school for the community. Then families would bring food for a picnic. Someone might play the fiddle, and everyone would dance. Just like today, people knew how to have fun. They just found different ways to do it. Music has always been a good way to have fun. Responding. Target vocabulary. Word builder. List events in which people compete. Tell what the event is, how they compete, and what skill they need to win. Copy the chart and add other words. Write about it. Text to self. Write about a time when you competed in a sport or other event. Tell why you were competing, what the game or event was, and what happened. Use words from the chart in your writing. Target vocabulary. Compete. Element. Identical. Intimidate. Master. Qualify. Recite. Routine. Uniform. Unison. Target strategy. Monitor, clarify. Notice what is confusing as you read. Find ways to understand it. Word teaser. You are exactly the same as yourself. What word are you?